Hello everybody! Happy New Year and welcome to the inaugural episode of my weekly movie reviews. I don't currently have a title, but suggestions in the comments are appreciated. It's January, the first week in fact, and with it comes wide releases of awards contenders which were only in limited release last month and a slew of disposable junk. As is January tradition, the first film of the year is a horror movie, Insidious: The Last Key, and will be my only review today. I will not be reviewing the awards contenders as their release slates are ridiculous, and I want to start this year off with a clean slate. 2018 films only. Along with the review of the latest entry in the Insidious series, I will break down this week's box office, and timestamps for everything covered here can be found in the description. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the review. Fair warning, spoilers ahead. Insidious: The Last Key is the fourth entry in the Insidious franchise, a sequel to Insidious Chapter 3, and a prequel to the first two installments. Series regular Lynn Shay returns as Elise, a psychic paranormal investigator who takes the assignment of extracting a possible ghost from a house, with the twist of this location being the house in which she grew up. Once she returns, Elise must confront her past, which includes her abusive father, estranged younger brother, a red door in the basement, and a demon with keys for fingers. The Last Key is, as first week January horror movie tradition, a below-average, rather bad film with some virtues. Before I plunge into the many things which didn't work, I'm going to touch on the things I liked. Firstly, Lynn Shay. I have only seen the first and third Insidious movies and cannot recall much about either, but Shay's performance as Elise has always been the first thing that comes to my mind when I'm reminded. She carries a quiet, reserved strength with her, and even when she's given increasingly poor dialogue, she always manages to deliver her lines with an understated sincerity. Even though she clearly deserves better, Shay's a true professional and never comes across as somebody who knows they deserve better, never goes over the top because she knows what kind of movie she's in and can get away with it. Not that I'd complain if that were the case, but her efforts here are respectable. Elise is certainly not an Academy Award-winning character by any means, but Shay's humble efforts have made this series stand out, admittedly in an overall small way, amid the sea of forgettable demons, generic mythos, disposable family drama, and clumsy themes of abuse. Also worth mentioning, in a movie full of performances of varied quality is Bruce Davidson, as Elise's brother Christian. He's given some of the weakest dialogue in the film, but somehow manages to elevate every scene he's in. Secondly, the screenplay by Leigh Whannell, while ultimately unsuccessful, does strive for more ambition than similar horror movies such as Annabelle Creation, The Forest, and Sinister 2. Whannell and I appear to have similar philosophies on horror being, underneath all the monsters and jump scares, about the darker and more sinister aspects of the human experience. Insidious has always been at its heart an ongoing story of abuse, and specifically domestic abuse. The demons are all metaphors, and the further has always been a narrative tool to make the thematic and abstract elements of the story into the physical. While this is now the fourth time through these motions, and I don't think any of the story elements on this level work, these ideas continue to invite more analysis and thought than similar titles. But while I didn't hate this movie, those are about the only things I can commend. So much about Insidious: The Last Key does not work, from the production to the performances to the story, all making this a rather frustrating experience. I'm going to start with director Adam Robitel, whose storytelling abilities in this effort lack an urgency and whose visual style is blandly uninspired. In both cases, Robitel appears to just be going through the motions set by James Wan's example in the first two films. Tracking shots with a figure standing quietly in the shadows, shot, reverse shot, shot, but now there's a scary monster face going boo, underlit sound stages of limited space with a fog machine, etc. James Wan directed the first movie on a budget of $1.5 million. The Last Key's budget is allegedly $10 million and looks cheaper. I know Wan is an efficient filmmaker and one of the best visual stylists in the Blumhouse stable, but the lack of new and fresh ideas from Robitel only add to the monotony of his less than stellar storytelling abilities. The Last Key's structure more resembles 3 episodes of a television show played in succession, with the first 2 proverbial episodes twiddling their thumbs in preparation for the third. I actually liked the opening sequence. I liked how it took its time, and it contains the only genuinely creepy moment when young Elise is talking to her brother from the bottom bunk, only for it to be revealed that it's not actually her brother that she's talking to. But then the film proper begins, losing its urgency as we must reassess Elise's environment many years later and become preoccupied with non-stop comedy beats which consistently last 2 beats too long. This disarms all of the tension built up in the opening, making the portion where Elise must return to her old house, the portion where things are supposed to get scary again, feel inconsequential, and we as an audience feel like we shouldn't care as a result. New, pivotal characters are introduced halfway through the film in the form of Elise's nieces and grown-up brother, but we're given barely any time at all to connect with them before they're thrown into a plot-driven finale of Elise and one of her nieces being kidnapped by the key-fingered demon. Any drama or tension is purely superficial, and that falls upon the poor way in which Robitel decides to use his real estate. But equal in its lackluster execution has got to be what I assume is Winnell's screenplay. As I've previously mentioned, Insidious has always been a story about abuse, and while it's certainly no Twin Peaks, there's always been a concerted effort to make the abstract physical. The demons and the further are physical manifestations of concepts of evil, but in The Last Key, the inner logic breaks apart under any scrutiny. Firstly, there are 2 elements we are introduced to in the opening sequence: Elise's younger brother's whistle and Elise's father. The information we're given regarding the former is that Elise and Christian's mother gave the whistle to Christian for moments when he is scared. If he blows the whistle, then she'll come directly to him since she is always near. The information we are given about the latter is that there is not a single shred of humanity in this abusive, evil man. One of the biggest problems of this first act is that we never see either Elise nor Christian use the whistle to summon their mother, but rather a ghost uses the whistle. Sure enough, their mother comes to the rescue, but the sloppiness here comes from the ongoing use of this whistle as some sort of symbol for hope in the eyes of Elise and Christian as adults. However, with the only use we see of this whistle coming from a ghost, perverting that purity in the direct connection between mother and child, I'm surprised these characters aren't horrified of this thing as a symbol of their past trauma. Whatever the intent was, the final product's execution never reflects anything other than warm memories for the characters whenever the whistle is brought up. To quickly jump over to the further for just a moment, once the film reaches its climax and Elise is in some kind of prison in the further, she sees her father in another cell. Under Keyface's control, Elise beats her father the way he once beat her, as any abuse in this movie isn't actually the responsibility of the person, since I guess all abusers are under this demon's control. After Elise breaks Keyface's control over her, Keyface begins to attack her, but her father stands up to this physical manifestation of the abstract concept of abuse. There's some thematic material to mine here, with Keyface's lingering presence and consistent MO acting as a stand-in for the cycle of abuse, and the cells representing how this cycle makes prisoners of us all, but this doesn't actually end up working. We never see Elise and Christian's father act remotely human. From the beginning, he's drunk and beating Elise, so this moment of him overcoming his evil carries no dramatic weight. Secondly, absolving this man of all his actions is childish. Speaking of Twin Peaks, that show found itself in a similar situation, with a person's actions having been found to be not their own, but that show rightfully course-corrected and altered this answer in its final episode, and later went back in time to put dirt on the perpetrator's hands in a prequel film. Absolving this man of his wrongdoings via "the devil made me do it" is one of the biggest easy buttons a writer can use. Going back to the whistle, since it plays a part in this climax, it's used when one of Elise's nieces brings the object with her into the further and tosses it to Elise when all hope seems to be lost. Elise uses the whistle after struggling to grab it, although why she didn't use the force to grab the whistle the way she used the force to open her cell is beyond me. And her mother shows up to vanquish the demon once and for all. Why her mother doesn't look like a haggard prisoner of the further is beyond me, but furthermore, since we never saw that direct setup with either Elise or Christian using the whistle in the beginning, this payoff lacks any dramatic payoff. Also, the only association with the whistle is Christian since it was his. And Elise using the whistle now lacks a direct emotional connection. There's a way to make this all work, and it involves making one of the kids in the beginning use the whistle and having this climax include having Christian enter the further. If he hands the whistle over to Elise to use to summon their mother, then all of this works so much better on a thematic level that we wouldn't necessarily question why the person who isn't being mauled by a demon doesn't use the whistle themselves and possibly summon the mother without having Elise risk fighting off Keyface while trying to reach the just so out of reach whistle. I understand the metaphor here with love being the remedy for abuse, but we never saw Elise and Christian's mother stand up to her monster of a husband, so her being able to stop Keyface Deus Ex Machina style begs questioning. Some complaints about semantics I have include Keyface. Why does he put these locks around his victims' necks if they aren't going to be chained to anything? After Elise is taken by Keyface, my assumption was that this demon had already locked her voice off when she had the keyhole positioned on top of her throat, but that wasn't the case. So why put those locks on to begin with? Speaking of the whole locking voices and hearts off, why bother with the voice box within the inner logic of the movie? I understand this from a thematic level, abusers silencing their victims, but why bother with the voice if you're immediately going to turn off the heart? Why slice open the skin over the heart and not on their neck? I know this is a PG-13 series, but it also gets by being about R-rated subject matter, and a creepy PG-13 safe way to turn the voices off, if you have to turn the voices off, would be for Keyface to force one of his key fingers down his victim's throat. It makes more practical sense since a person's mouth more resembles a keyhole than a bare neck, and it's a way to visually imply the already implied sexual abuse in a somewhat alien-styled manner. The key fingers magically reaching through the neck feels bizarrely toned down next to making a keyhole via cutting the flesh over a person's heart. I also, within the inner logic of the movie, don't understand how Elise gets her voice back just because of her mother's love. Since the further is a way to make the abstract physical, the mother should have keys or key fingers herself to unlock her daughter's voice. The abstract love magically solves problems, especially doesn't work in this environment. He's going to unlock all the doors, Elise exclaims, but why is this a bad thing? Why is this a bad thing, and then why does Elise leave red doors open when she's trying to return to her body? Other problems I have with The Last Key mostly involve performances. Lin Shaye and Bruce Davison are genuinely great here, but the comedic relief duo are aggressively not funny. I always forget these characters exist until I see a new Insidious movie. The father and mother and one of the nieces are serviceable, but the other niece and many of the extras aren't presented in a flattering light. I like the red herring and bait and switch that takes place where one of Elise's nieces seems to be also psychic and will be more important later in the story, only for her to be taken out of the picture and the other niece to be psychic and more important later in the story. The problem is that the niece taken out of the picture was easily the better actress between the two. I guess I did kinda like Keyface's character design. In a world where most demons in horror movies are underlit due to a lack of budget and creativity, this one does stand out somewhat, and the key fingers are a nice touch. Once you've seen about 10 horror movies, you've really seen about all the tricks in the book, and Insidious: The Last Key is all about delivering on familiar scares. Long and never-ending scenes of people slowly making their way down a hallway or narrow passage, shot, reverse shot, shot again, but now there's a scary monster man in the background, shadowy figures quietly, casually standing around as the main character is clueless to their presence, creepy demon monsters crawling on all fours accompanied by bone-cracking sound effects, etc. If you've never seen a horror movie, and it did seem like baby's first horror movie at the screening I attended with the amount of teenagers overreacting to the most familiar of chills, or if you like this sort of thing regardless of how been there done that this is, then you may find enjoyment here. I, however, found the story to fall apart, the production to be generic, the performances to be inconsistent, and the direction to be underwhelming. I did like some of the fleeting ideas, however, and found Lin Shaye's lead performance to be quite good. My final score of Insidious: The Last Key is a 4.5 out of 10. This weekend's box office numbers saw Sony's family adventure comedy Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle coming in first place for the first time in its 3-week run, making $37.2 million and only dropping 25.6% from last week. Jumanji's focus on entertainment for the entire family has proven to be a force to be reckoned with, especially against its most immediate competitor, Star Wars. There's certainly a lot of draw in Jumanji between the star power of Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart, the positive word of mouth regarding Jack Black, action, humor, not too scary for young viewers and also not very challenging. Welcome to the Jungle has proven to be a fun, escapist distraction in recent weeks. Debuting in second place was Insidious: The Last Key with an impressive $29.5 million. With a significant lack of horror movies at the multiplexes in the last couple months and a recognizable brand, Insidious has made a big splash and surprised me at how much money it made. I don't know why I was surprised though, since there are always teenagers and young adults looking to see a scary movie or kill a couple hours getting scared. Still, nearly $30 million on opening weekend on a projected $10 million budget, Insidious: The Last Key is already turning quite a profit. Coming in third, dethroned from the top spot after 3 consecutive weeks, is Star Wars: The Last Jedi, making an additional $23.7 million and dropping 54.8% from last weekend, with a lifetime domestic gross of $572.6 million. The drop-offs for The Last Jedi have been a little on the staggering side compared to The Force Awakens about 2 years ago, but with Christmas, the biggest movie day of the year, falling on a Monday, and these box office lists only accounting for the weekend, the drop-offs being so big are to be expected, especially when Star Wars is an annual event, and possible oversaturation may be turning people away from multiple viewings. It's also a bit stranger than The Force Awakens, which may be a turnoff, and fans seem to be aggressively angered by the film too. Still, The Last Jedi has made over $1 billion worldwide and is a runaway financial success, even bigger than Rogue One. The Greatest Showman stayed in 4th place in its 3rd week, dipping only 11.3% and having insanely positive word of mouth. I really didn't care for the film, but with Golden Globe nominations, Hugh Jackman's star power, and providing a scratch for those with a musical itch, The Greatest Showman has made over $150 million worldwide. With a budget of $84 million, however, it may not turn as big a profit as 20th Century Fox might have hoped. The terrible Pitch Perfect 3 rounded out the top 5, adding $10.2 million to its take, only dropping a respectable 38.7% from last week, and already turning a profit in its 3rd week. Ferdinand continued to stay in the top 10 with $7.6 million, a counter-programming option for families and young children. Aaron Sorkin's Molly's Game hit a wide release, making $6.8 million in 7th place. Awards contender and Gary Oldman Performance Showcase Darkest Hour stayed in 8th place, increasing its take by 10.3% and making an additional $6 million. Rounding out the top 10 were Coco in 9th place, making $5.3 million, and Ridley Scott's All the Money in the World in 10th with $3.5 million. Thank you all for watching this first episode of my weekly movie reviews. Next week sees the release of Steven Spielberg's The Post, and expect reviews for the Taraji P. Henson action vehicle Proud Mary, the Liam Neeson action vehicle The Commuter, and maybe Paddington 2. See you at the movies.